Scott, last week when you and I first spoke about this, we spoke about the subject of the misconception that it's slave labour and the quality isn't there, and that is a huge mindset shift, especially if so many jobs are going offshore. That's going to be a huge culture change for Australia, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and we've kind of developed a blind spot around this issue because, you know, going back 10 years or more, when the telcos, in particular the telecommunications companies, first did offshoring, they didn't do it particularly well, and so we've kind of developed a bit of an aversion to certain accents, and that's given us in this country a blind spot to that. We've got this, the average person has this impression that offshore equals lower quality, and the only businesses that would do that are those that don't really care about quality or customer feedback. Whereas in reality, there's, you know, many businesses, SME-sized businesses, not big businesses either, that are out there implementing quality improvements based upon their offshoring. So yeah, we're up for a massive shift in understanding, a mind shift.
Scott, we picked this this session on outsourcing everything from a logo design, you know, a one-off job for a logo design, right through to, you know, an entire workforce. Can you give some examples of some of the companies that you're working with, or some of the things that you've seen, you know, outsourced or offshore, whether it's a simple task or you know, it's multiple tasks? And I know the example, just to kick you off, of, you know, a guy that we both know who builds websites for his own business now, and you know, it's the process is so simple and so cost effective. He builds 5, picks the one he likes the most, and throws the other 4 away. So have you got any other stories like that, Scott, or experiences you can share?
Yeah, certainly, and it does. There is a fair bit to do with the scale of these sorts of issues, and one of the things that we deal with in my seminar is how to identify which things are best done as a project by a third-party organisation. Like you're saying there, perhaps if you want to get a website built, but that's not your core business, you perhaps give that to a third-party provider who may be offshore, versus the need to have full-time in-house full-time staff, I guess. So for example, you know, some of my IT team offshore, full-time staff, they are employed essentially the same way that Australian staff are employed, because they've got a full job of work to do every single day, and they bring value every single day. So there's kind of that project approach, which is often better outsourced to a third party, whether that third party be in Australia or offshore. And then there's the full-time dedicated staff approach, which is very much the same as hiring staff in Australia.
We've just had a question come through, and I'll just share some of the comments that have come through from the audience, Scott and Shane. Looking forward to hearing from this, Scott. Love this concept of learn over lunch. Vicky Holmes has put her hand up to say that she's here. Shane, don't talk over the top of Emma. Thought you'd like that one, Shane. And a really good question for you, Scott, is do you see this being affected by political government policies?
Yeah, it definitely has the potential to do that. I spent a chapter in the book talking about that, or analysing that. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and there's no concrete answers yet. Each government of, if you like, westernised countries like Australia and the US and the UK are all struggling with this concept right now, and there is no standardised approach to it. So it's been discussed fairly constantly over the past 2 years in the US as to different ways to deal with it. We should be taxing countries that are offshore, companies that are offshoring. We should be providing incentives to those that aren't. But as I point out in the book, the biggest challenge you've got with trying to legislate on this issue is actually being able to track and understand what's going on. So, you know, businesses in Australia that are setting up offshore teams or sending a job, a project offshore to do, there's no way to track that. There's no central government authority that has any way of figuring out what's actually going on. So if you don't understand it, how can you control it? So my conclusion is that, and I'm happy to be proved wrong, I just couldn't see another answer, is that this is going ahead whether we like it or not, and rather than being regressive politically in our thinking and trying to prevent it, that we should embrace it, and embrace it in a sustainable format, and help businesses to adapt. That's really why I set up Easy Offshore, because I think that there's going to be a lot of businesses that refuse to adapt or try to stay the same, and they're basically just going to fail in a lot of industries because they'll be outpaced and outpriced by businesses that have got this new global sourcing methodology.
So I'll just throw to you in a minute, Shane, but just to recap on that, Scott, and I want to sort of bring it back soon to how do we look at it for our own businesses and in our own backyard, because politics is, you know, a bigger picture thing. So I'll bring it back to us as individual business owners in a minute. But Shane, I know you like to talk about politics and policy. As a business owner who uses this, what do you see the implications being?
Look, my view is that anybody who's trying to fight it is trying to fight back a tide. This is coming. Well, it's not coming, it's here. You know, someone said to me recently, it's not the future, it's the now. Agreeing with Scott, telcos have been doing it for years, banks have been doing it for years, some better than others, but if you look at the number of companies that are offshoring, and you only have to open the paper on the weekend and there'll be 2 or 3 articles about someone, you know, Telstra, I think it was last week, laying off 53 tech jobs and sending them offshore. And you know, some of the offshoring is like small, you know, we're talking about 1s or 2s or 10s or 20s, and some of them we're talking about thousands. And, you know, maybe it's my optimistic entrepreneurial spirit, but I think get on board or get left behind. You know, this is here. And I guess maybe as you know, as an insurance policy, should governments change or should something change, you can always go back to the status quo. But trying to avoid it now doesn't make any sense to me.
So bringing it back home and what we can do with our businesses, Scott, where do we start? If you're a regular local business, if you like, where can we get started with offshoring and even considering it for our business?
Yeah, sure. I think a great place to start is to read the book, and I'm happy to give some copies of that to the attendees today. It's not really a plug for me, it's just that I put a lot of effort into making sure that book gives people a useful introduction to the topic and the concept, because I found one of the biggest sticking points is that a lot of business owners think, I get that the idea is important and I get that things are changing, but I don't see how it applies to my business. And the book really kind of changes people's perspective on that. So I think that's a good place to start. And I've found there's not a great deal of online resources around this topic yet. And again, that's why I got Easy Offshore going, because it's really quite hard to find useful information on this. And there's, you know, I don't know how many emails you guys get every week from people offering you SEO services from some other country, but it's the same concept applies. It's really hard to tell who's a good provider and who isn't, and quite frankly, the majority of them aren't. As with anything, the majority of businesses you probably would want to deal with. So
just touching on that, Scott, you mentioned quality before. Is that a common objection that you get when you speak to people about outsourcing?
It's one of the most common concerns. The ethics is a big concern. Are we paying slave wages, and understanding the reality of that? And are we reducing our quality? And what are our clients going to think of this if we have offshore teams speaking to our customers? They're probably the 2 biggest things that need addressing first, and they're actually the very first 2 topics that I talk about in the seminar. Because if you're not convinced by those 2 points, you're never going to do anything useful with the rest of the information.